The Queen has led the people of all the nations of the United Kingdom in expressing her respect and gratitude for the men and women who secured victory in the Second World War 75 years ago on VE Day. In a televised address, her second in the space of 5 weeks during the current crisis, Her Majesty said it was difficult not to mark the anniversary in the usual way, but she insisted that Britain was still a country that the war generation would recognise and admire. Earlier, a 2-minute silence was observed at 11 this morning, the moment in 1945 when Nazi Germany surrendered. Our first report tonight is by our royal correspondent, Witchell.
This is London. His Majesty King George VI.
It was the night a nation gave thanks as it emerged from a terrible struggle, and the King recalled the many thousands who'd been lost.
We have come to the end of our tribulation, and they are not with us at the moment of our rejoicing.
75 years later, the Queen recalled her father's words and Britain's great deliverance from tyranny.
At the start, the outlook seemed bleak, the end distant, the outcome uncertain. But we kept faith that the cause was right.
On VE night, the Queen was 19.
Never give up, never despair. That was the message of VE Day. I vividly remember the jubilant scenes my sister and I witnessed with our parents and Winston Churchill from the balcony of Buckingham Palace.
The message of VE Day was very clear.
Many people laid down their lives in that terrible conflict. They fought so we could live in peace, at home and abroad. They died so we could live as free people in a world of free nations. They risked all so our families and neighbourhoods could be safe. We should and will remember them.
And then to today's battle, as a lockdown country dealt with coronavirus. It was hard, the Queen said, that this anniversary could not be marked as we'd wished.
Instead, we remember from our homes and our doorsteps. But our streets are not empty. They are filled with the love and the care that we have for each other. And when I look at our country today and see what we are willing to do to protect and support one another, I say with pride that we are still a nation those brave soldiers, sailors and airmen would recognise and admire.
It was a message which called to the spirit of the wartime generation to rally the nation's resolve. The lockdown had severely curtailed the VE Day commemorations. But at 11 o'clock, the Prince of Wales with the Duchess of Cornwall had led the national tributes at Balmoral. A field gun at Edinburgh Castle signalled the start of a carefully managed national 2-minute silence. At Balmoral, as the silence ended, the Prince of Wales laid his wreath in tribute to the Second World War generation. And over the White Cliffs near Dover, 2 Spitfires, the aircraft which helped to defend Britain, flying today in remembrance of the few, linking those who saw them with the events of 75 years ago, as today's political leaders paid their tributes.
All of us who were born since 1945 are acutely conscious that we owe everything we most value to the generation who won the Second World War.
We remember the millions of people from across the United Kingdom and from across the world who came together in World War II to fight for our shared values. Values of freedom, of democracy, of peace.
75 years ago, Britain's streets were teeming with joyful crowds. The contrast with those same streets today is striking. And yet 75 years after the end of the Second World War in Europe, a nation in lockdown looked beyond its present challenges to give thanks. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Nick, can we talk about the Queen's message tonight? Because we have had two powerful statements now from Her Majesty in the space of just a few weeks.
Yes, and I think in relation to today's broadcast, she will have been wary of striking too obvious a connection between World War II and the coronavirus battle. World War II, after all, a war of national survival, lasted nearly 6 years. Nearly 500,000 Britons lost their lives. But many of the messages concerning the VE anniversary, of course, are relevant to our current predicament. Keep faith, never give up, never despair. Then she turned to coronavirus, though she never actually mentioned the word, and this powerful conclusion: we are still essentially the same nation with the same deep-rooted qualities, impulses and resources. And this, I thought, was really the heart of the broadcast, and this poignant, almost ultimate compliment from her, that we are still a nation that the World War II generation would, as she said, recognise and admire. And of course it's said with conviction and authenticity from someone who is herself a member of that generation. We saw her there on the Buckingham Palace balcony. And there will be those, I'm sure, who will conclude that this is really quite a strong endorsement of the principle of the continuity that is represented by a constitutional monarchy, of having the same person at the centre of national life for decade after decade.
Nick, many thanks again. Nicholas Witchell there, our royal correspondent. Well, around the UK, many street parties which were planned long before the lockdown was imposed did go ahead, albeit with the social distancing measures in place. Now, our correspondent Duncan Kennedy has been taking a look at the different ways in which people have been marking this anniversary.
The nation isolates, but the nation also celebrates. This may be Hillary Avenue, but it's definitely one of thousands of street parties across the land.
I think it's really nice that we all came together to celebrate.
I love it. I think it's a really great way to get communities together. Obviously, we've all got social distance and everything.
It was a double day for Sheila Webster. She was born on VE Day. Happy birthday, Sheila. 75 today.
Yes, thank you.
Special day.
It is, yes. And I can't believe that I'm 75.
Everyone here is social distancing, but everyone is also here for a moment of unity, fun and recollection.
Land of hope and glory.
The hope and the glory was shared across the land. This was Kenilworth, a day of sunshine, bunting and reminiscences about VE Day.
You got your medals, Dad?
Rusty Warman was a Lancaster bomber pilot and survived 30 missions. By VE Day, it was definitely time to celebrate.
Thank you all so much for doing what you've done and just being here and saying hello. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
This was the day that Rusty shone. Sunderland was also putting on a show. The caution about mixing too close followed here, just like everywhere else. That included Caerphilly. They preferred vintage dancing to mark the day, 3/4 of a century after VE Day. Earlier, the mood was more sombre. In Portsmouth, a lament for those who could not come home to celebrate, their dreams unfulfilled. In Malvern, they caught the duality of the moment, a tribute to health workers on the day we remembered victory in Europe. And tonight, a community rendition of the song that came to define the wartime yearnings of loss and hope. 75 years, an expanse of time, an arc across generations, fresh moments amid the cherished memories. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News.